The biggest mistake people make is assuming they already know who is standing in front of them. On a warm spring evening in downtown New York City, the Grand Whitmore Foundation Gala attracted some of the most influential people in the country. Business executives, celebrities, investors, politicians, and journalists filled the magnificent ballroom of the historic Crescent Hotel. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the room with golden light, while a live orchestra played softly in the background. Every table displayed extravagant floral arrangements, and every guest seemed eager to be seen. At the center of it all stood Charles Whitmore, a 54-year-old billionaire whose technology empire had transformed entire industries. To the public, Charles was brilliant, confident, and larger than life. He had built his fortune from almost nothing and was known for his sharp wit and unpredictable personality. People admired him, feared him, and constantly competed for his attention. That evening, Charles appeared especially relaxed. Surrounded by powerful friends and successful business partners, he moved comfortably through the crowd, exchanging jokes and stories. Laughter followed him wherever he went. Yet, while the guests enjoyed the luxury and excitement of the event, very few people noticed the individuals working quietly behind the scenes. Among them was Megan Brooks, a hard-working single mother employed as part of the event staff. Megan had spent years cleaning offices, organizing events, and taking every opportunity she could find to support her daughter. She never complained. She simply worked harder whenever life became difficult. Standing near a service entrance several yards away was her 13-year-old daughter, Lily Brooks. Because Megan could not always afford childcare during large events, Lily occasionally accompanied her after school. She usually stayed out of sight, helping with small tasks when needed and spending most of her time reading books or completing homework. Tonight was no different. Dressed in simple clothing that contrasted sharply with the expensive gowns and tailored suits surrounding her, Lily quietly observed the glamorous world unfolding around her. Most guests never looked in her direction. To them, she was invisible. As the evening progressed, a professional dance troupe took the stage to entertain the crowd. Their performance was energetic, elegant, and technically impressive. Guests applauded enthusiastically after every routine. Charles seemed particularly amused. Several glasses of sparkling cider and countless conversations had placed him in an unusually playful mood. After one especially difficult performance ended, he walked onto the stage holding a microphone. The room immediately fell silent. Everyone wanted to hear what the billionaire would say next. Charles grinned and pointed toward the dancers. "I have a challenge," he announced. Laughter spread through the ballroom before he even continued. "If anyone here can dance that routine perfectly, I will give them $100 million. The audience erupted with amusement. Some guests laughed loudly. Others exchanged skeptical smiles. Everyone assumed it was a joke. Even Charles appeared entertained by his own statement. Across the room, Lily looked toward the stage. Unlike everyone else, she was not laughing. Her expression changed in a way nobody noticed. For just a moment, something hidden behind her quiet personality seemed to awaken. While the crowd dismissed the challenge and returned to their conversations, Lily continued staring at the stage. And as the music resumed and the evening moved forward, no one in that magnificent ballroom realized that the person who would change everything was standing silently near the service entrance, completely overlooked by everyone around her. After the laughter faded and the orchestra resumed playing, most of the guests quickly forgot about Charles Whitmore's challenge. Conversations returned to business deals, investment opportunities, and social connections. Waiters moved gracefully between tables carrying trays of refreshments, while photographers captured images of influential guests enjoying the evening. To everyone else, the challenge had been nothing more than a billionaire's entertaining joke. But for Lily Brooks, those words lingered in her mind long after the crowd moved on. Standing near the service entrance, she watched the professional dancers leave the stage. Her eyes followed every movement with unusual focus. There was something about the performance that felt familiar. Not because she had seen it before, but because dance had once been an important part of her life. Few people knew that. In fact, almost nobody knew. Several years earlier, When life had been a little easier, Lily had attended a small dance studio in Queens. She had fallen in love with movement almost immediately. Her instructors often praised her dedication, her natural rhythm, and her ability to learn routines faster than students much older than herself. For a while, dancing had been her favorite thing in the world. Then circumstances changed. As expenses increased and financial pressures grew, dance lessons became impossible to afford. Megan never wanted her daughter to sacrifice her dreams, but paying rent, utilities, groceries, and transportation always came first. Lily understood that reality better than most children her age. She never complained when the lessons stopped. She simply thanked her mother for everything she had already done and quietly packed away her dance shoes. Yet the dream never completely disappeared. Over the years, Lily continued practicing whenever she could. Sometimes she watched performances online. Sometimes she studied routines from videos at the public library. Other times she simply danced alone in their apartment after finishing homework. No audience. No applause. No recognition. Just a young girl refusing to let go of something she loved. Across the ballroom, Charles remained the center of attention. People gathered around him constantly. Every joke earned laughter. Every story attracted listeners. Yet despite the crowd surrounding him, Charles occasionally found himself glancing toward the edges of the room. He had always been observant. Building a business empire required noticing details others missed. Earlier, when he made the challenge, he thought he saw a reaction from a young girl standing near the service area. While everyone else laughed, she had looked serious. Focused. Almost thoughtful. The memory briefly crossed his mind again before another conversation pulled his attention elsewhere. Meanwhile, Megan continued working. She noticed her daughter staring toward the stage and walked over during a short break. "Everything okay?" she asked. Lily smiled. "Yes." Megan knew that answer was not completely honest. Mothers often recognize things children try to hide. "What are you thinking about?" she asked gently. Lily hesitated. Finally, she looked toward the stage again. "Do you think some dreams ever come back?" Megan seemed surprised by the question. For a moment, sadness appeared in her eyes. Then she placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. "I think real dreams never leave," she said softly. "Sometimes they just wait for the right moment." Those words stayed with Lily. As the evening continued, additional performances took place. More speeches followed. Guests applauded and celebrated charitable achievements. Yet beneath the glamour of the event, something was quietly changing. For years, Lily had convinced herself that certain opportunities belonged to other people. Wealthier people. More connected people. People who lived in a completely different world. But standing inside that ballroom, listening to her mother's words, she felt something awakening that she had buried long ago. She did not know what would happen next. She certainly did not imagine how dramatically her life was about to change. But as she looked toward the brightly lit stage once more, a decision slowly began forming in her mind, and before the night was over, that decision would place her directly in front of the most powerful people in the room. As the evening moved closer to its grand finale, the atmosphere inside the Crescent Hotel became even more energetic. Guests filled the ballroom with conversation, while servers cleared tables and prepared for the final segment of the gala. On stage, performers continued entertaining the crowd, but Lily Brooks found it increasingly difficult to focus on anything except the challenge Charles Whitmore had jokingly announced earlier. The words repeated in her mind again and again. Most people had laughed because they viewed the challenge as impossible. Some assumed it was simply another example of a billionaire enjoying the attention of a crowd. Yet for Lily, the challenge represented something very different. It felt like a door that had unexpectedly opened for just a few seconds. The problem was that she had no idea whether she was brave enough to walk through it. Near the back of the ballroom, Megan continued helping the event staff. Every so often, she glanced toward her daughter and noticed the thoughtful expression on Lily's face. Something was clearly happening inside her mind. Megan had seen that look before. It was the same expression Lily wore whenever she became determined to accomplish something difficult. The realization made Megan both hopeful and nervous. She understood how deeply her daughter loved dance. She also understood how painful disappointment could be. Meanwhile, several event organizers gathered near the stage to discuss the schedule. One of them mentioned Charles's challenge while laughing with colleagues. Another joked that half the city would probably volunteer if they believed the offer was real. Their laughter attracted the attention of several nearby guests. Soon the conversation spread through the room once again. People began discussing the challenge for a second time. Some debated whether anyone could actually perform the routine. Others argued that professional dancers spent years mastering such skills. The more people talked about it, the more the challenge transformed from a joke into a topic of genuine curiosity. Charles noticed this development and found it amusing. Standing near a group of investors, he smiled as he listened to the growing speculation. Then an unexpected thought crossed his mind. What if someone actually volunteered? The idea seemed unlikely, but not impossible. Looking around the ballroom, he realized there were hundreds of people present. Surely one of them might be bold enough to try. Across the room, Lily heard the renewed discussion. Her heart began beating faster. For years she had remained invisible in places like this. People saw expensive suits, luxury dresses, and powerful titles. They never saw her. Yet a small voice inside her kept asking the same question. What if? What if she stepped forward? What if she tried? What if the dreams she buried years ago still existed somewhere inside her? The questions became impossible to ignore. Finally, she stood up from her chair. The movement alone felt significant. For several seconds she simply remained standing, looking toward the stage. Then she began walking. At first nobody paid attention. She moved carefully through the edges of the crowd, passing tables filled with guests who barely noticed her presence. Step by step, she moved closer to the center of the ballroom. Megan suddenly looked up and froze. She immediately understood where Lily was going. Their eyes met across the room. For a brief moment neither spoke. Then Megan gave the smallest nod imaginable. It was not permission. It was trust. The kind of trust only a mother could give. Lily felt a surge of courage. She continued forward until she reached the area directly in front of the stage. Nearby guests finally began noticing her. Confused expressions appeared on several faces. Conversation slowed. Charles happened to glance in her direction at the exact same moment. The room was not silent yet, but it was heading in that direction. And as dozens of curious eyes gradually turned toward a 13-year-old girl nobody had noticed before, Lily realized there was no turning back. The gradual silence spreading through the ballroom felt almost unreal. Guests who moments earlier had been discussing business deals and social events now focused their attention on a single young girl standing near the stage. Lily Brooks could feel hundreds of eyes watching her. Her heart raced so quickly that she could hear it in her ears. Every instinct told her to turn around and disappear back into the crowd. It would have been easy. Nobody expected anything from her. Nobody would blame her for walking away. Yet, as she looked toward the brightly lit stage, she remembered the years she had spent practicing alone in her small apartment. She remembered balancing on worn floors while imagining she was performing in front of an audience. She remembered the sacrifices her mother had made and the dreams she had quietly buried. For the first time in a very long while, she decided she would not hide. Charles Whitmore noticed her hesitation and became curious. He stepped forward slightly and smiled. The expression was friendly but amused. Like everyone else in the room, he assumed the moment would end with laughter. "Well," he said into the microphone, "it looks like someone has something to say." A ripple of laughter moved through the audience. Lily swallowed nervously. Her voice almost failed her. Then she forced herself to speak. "I would like to try." The reaction was immediate. Some guests exchanged surprised looks. Others smiled politely, assuming she was joking. A few people openly laughed. None of it sounded cruel, but the message was clear. They did not believe she belonged on that stage. Charles studied her carefully. You want to try the routine? He asked. Lily nodded. Yes. The ballroom became even quieter. Charles glanced toward the professional dancers who had performed earlier. Several of them appeared surprised. One dancer raised an eyebrow and folded his arms, clearly wondering whether the girl understood how difficult the routine actually was. Charles looked back at Lily. Do you have any dance experience? The question felt simple enough, yet Lily knew the answer would reveal far more than she wanted. For a moment she considered saying no. Then she remembered her mother's words. Real dreams never leave. A little, she replied softly. More laughter drifted through the room. To many guests, that answer sounded almost absurd. The routine they had witnessed required years of training and discipline. A little experience would never be enough. Megan stood frozen near the service area. She wanted to protect her daughter from embarrassment, yet she also knew Lily better than anyone. Beneath the nervous expression was a determination that rarely appeared. Once Lily committed to something, she rarely backed away. Charles continued observing her. Something about her confidence felt unusual. Most people seeking attention spoke loudly. They exaggerated. They tried to impress. Lily did none of those things. She simply stood there waiting. Eventually Charles shrugged and smiled again. All right, he said. Let us see what happens. The audience erupted with excitement. Some people pulled out their phones. Others leaned forward in anticipation. A few whispered predictions to friends seated nearby. Nobody expected greatness. Most expected an amusing moment that would provide another story to discuss over dinner. Event organizers quickly coordinated with the musicians while the professional dancers moved aside. Lily slowly walked toward the stage. Each step felt heavier than the last. Yet with every step, another feeling began replacing her fear. It was familiar. Comfortable. Almost forgotten. By the time she reached the center of the stage, she no longer saw the wealthy guests or the dazzling lights. She no longer heard the whispers or the laughter. For the first time in years, she felt the same feeling she once experienced inside that small dance studio in Queens. And as the music director prepared to start the routine, an unexpected expression crossed Charles Whitmore's face. For the first time that evening, he stopped smiling and started paying very close attention. The first notes of the music echoed through the ballroom, and for a brief moment nothing happened. Lily stood perfectly still at the center of the stage while hundreds of guests watched with curiosity. Several people expected her to freeze. Others assumed she would become overwhelmed by the attention and leave. Even some of the professional dancers waited politely, believing the performance would last only a few seconds. Then the rhythm shifted, and Lily moved. The transformation was immediate. The nervous girl who had walked onto the stage seemed to disappear. In her place stood someone completely different. Her posture became confident. Her timing matched the music with astonishing precision. Every movement flowed naturally into the next as though she had rehearsed the routine countless times. The audience grew quieter with each passing second. Conversation stopped. Phones that had been raised to record a humorous moment remained raised for an entirely different reason. People were no longer documenting a joke. They were witnessing something unexpected. Charles Whitmore felt his amusement fading. He folded his arms and focused entirely on the stage. At first he searched for mistakes, expecting them to appear at any moment. Yet they never came. Instead, Lily continued performing with remarkable control and grace. The routine demanded balance, coordination, memory, rhythm, and confidence. She seemed to possess all of them. Across the ballroom, Megan could hardly believe what she was seeing. Tears formed in her eyes as memories flooded back. She remembered driving Lily to dance lessons years earlier. She remembered sitting quietly in small studios while instructors praised her daughter's dedication. She remembered the painful day they could no longer afford the classes. Most of all, she remembered Lily pretending not to be disappointed because she did not want her mother to feel guilty. Standing near the service area now, Megan realized that her daughter had never truly stopped dancing. The dream had survived. On stage, Lily lost herself completely in the music. For the first time in years, she was not thinking about money, social status, or whether she belonged in the room. She was simply doing what she loved. The audience could feel it. Authentic passion has a way of reaching people without explanation. One by one, skeptical expressions disappeared. Guests who had laughed earlier now watched in stunned silence. A famous investor seated near the front leaned forward in disbelief. A television host quietly lowered her drink and stared at the stage. Even the professional dancers exchanged surprised glances. They recognized something the audience did not fully understand. Talent alone was not enough to perform like this. Discipline was required. Countless hours of practice were required. Commitment was required. Whatever Lily's story might be, it clearly involved much more than a little experience. Charles noticed the same thing. As the routine continued, he found himself asking questions. Who was this girl? Where had she trained? Why had nobody mentioned her before? More importantly, why was someone with this level of ability standing among the event staff instead of pursuing opportunities available to talented performers? The questions multiplied with every passing moment. Then the music reached its most difficult section. Earlier in the evening, this was the part that had impressed the audience the most when the professionals performed it. Lily approached it without hesitation. Her movements remained smooth, confident, and perfectly synchronized with the rhythm. A collective gasp moved through the ballroom. For the first time all night, Charles Whitmore's jaw literally dropped. He was no longer watching out of curiosity. He was watching with genuine amazement. And as Lily entered the final portion of the routine, the silence inside the ballroom became so complete that it felt as though every person in the room had forgotten how to breathe. When the final note of the music faded into silence, Lily remained motionless for a brief moment at the center of the stage. The ballroom seemed frozen in time. Hundreds of guests stared at her, struggling to process what they had just witnessed. A few seconds earlier, many of them had viewed her as an anonymous teenager standing near the event staff. Now they were looking at her, as though they had discovered someone entirely different. The silence stretched longer than anyone expected. Then, from somewhere near the front row, a single person began applauding. Another followed. Then another. Within moments, the entire ballroom erupted into thunderous applause. Guests rose from their chairs. Business leaders, celebrities, investors, and community leaders stood together in a standing ovation that seemed to shake the room itself. Lily blinked in surprise. She had imagined many possible outcomes before stepping onto the stage, but this was not one of them. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked across the crowd. The faces that had once appeared indifferent now reflected admiration and amazement. Near the service area, Megan covered her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks. She had spent years worrying that circumstances had permanently stolen her daughter's opportunity to pursue what she loved. Watching the audience rise to celebrate, Lily felt like seeing a forgotten dream come back to life. Charles Whitmore remained standing near the stage, but unlike everyone else, he was not clapping immediately. He was thinking. The performance had raised questions that demanded answers. He had spent decades identifying talent in business, technology, and leadership. What he had just seen was talent of a different kind, but no less extraordinary. Eventually he picked up the microphone and stepped forward. The applause gradually softened. Everyone wanted to hear what he would say. Charles looked directly at Lily. "How long have you been dancing?" he asked. The question echoed through the ballroom. Lily hesitated. "Since I was little," she answered honestly. Charles nodded. "Who trained you?" Again, she hesitated. "Several teachers when I was younger." Charles sensed there was more to the story. "And you still take lessons now?" A shadow crossed Lily's face. "No." The answer was simple, but it changed the atmosphere instantly. Charles noticed it. So did many others. "Why not?" he asked gently. Lily glanced toward her mother. Megan immediately looked down. The room became quiet again. Finally, Lily answered. "Because we could not afford them anymore." No one laughed this time. The words landed differently than anyone expected. For the first time, many guests realized they were not simply witnessing a talented young dancer. They were witnessing someone who had continued developing her abilities despite losing access to opportunities most performers considered essential. Charles studied her expression carefully. There was no bitterness in her voice. No resentment. She was simply telling the truth. That honesty impressed him even more than the performance itself. The billionaire lowered the microphone and spent several moments in thought. Then he turned toward one of his senior assistants standing near the stage. "I want everything you can find about Lily Brooks," he said quietly. "Her background, her education, her training, her goals. Everything." The assistant nodded immediately. Meanwhile, guests continued approaching the stage to congratulate Lily. Professional dancers who had performed earlier shook her hand and praised her talent. Several admitted they were shocked. One instructor even remarked that her natural ability was extraordinary. Through it all, Lily remained humble. She thanked everyone politely but seemed far more concerned about finding her mother than enjoying the attention. Charles noticed that too. Most people would have been overwhelmed by the applause. Lily appeared grateful yet grounded. As the evening finally approached its conclusion, Charles found himself looking at her with growing curiosity. He had expected a moment of entertainment. Instead, he had uncovered a mystery. And as guests slowly began leaving the ballroom, he made a decision. Before this story was over, he intended to learn exactly how a girl with such remarkable talent had remained hidden from the world for so long. The gala ended, but Charles Whitmore could not stop thinking about Lily Brooks. Long after the final guests departed and the ballroom lights were dimmed, her performance remained fixed in his mind. Over the years, he had encountered thousands of talented people. Some possessed natural ability. Others achieved success through relentless effort. What made Lily different was the combination of talent, discipline, humility, and perseverance. The more he reflected on the evening, the more convinced he became that her story extended far beyond a single performance. The following morning, while most people were discussing the gala highlights on social media and in local news articles, Charles began searching for answers. His assistant arrived at his office carrying a folder containing everything they had managed to learn overnight. Charles expected to find a history of elite training programs, expensive instructors, and prestigious opportunities. Instead, what he discovered left him speechless. Lily had not attended a famous performing arts academy. She had not traveled the world competing in major competitions. In fact, after losing access to formal lessons several years earlier, she had continued teaching herself. According to former instructors, she possessed exceptional potential from a young age. One teacher described her as one of the most naturally gifted students she had ever taught. Another recalled Lily practicing long after classes ended, determined to improve every detail of her technique. Yet every report eventually reached the same conclusion. Financial difficulties forced her family to stop the training she loved. Charles continued reading. What he learned next affected him even more. Rather than becoming discouraged, Lily redirected her energy toward helping her mother. Neighbors described her as responsible beyond her years. Teachers praised her academic performance and maturity. Community members spoke about her willingness to volunteer and assist others. Several people specifically mentioned that she never complained about opportunities she had lost. She simply focused on making the best of whatever circumstances she faced. Charles placed the folder on his desk and stared out the window overlooking Manhattan. He had spent much of his life surrounded by people chasing recognition. Many sought success because they wanted attention, status, or admiration. Lily seemed completely different. She had continued pursuing excellence even when nobody was watching. Later that week, Charles arranged a private meeting with several individuals who knew Lily personally. One former dance instructor joined through a video call. Another educator met him in person. Their descriptions were remarkably consistent. They spoke about determination, kindness, and resilience. One instructor shared a memory that particularly stayed with him. Several years earlier, after learning she could no longer afford classes, Lily had spent her final day encouraging younger students rather than focusing on her own disappointment. The instructor admitted she had never forgotten that moment. Charles listened carefully. By the end of the conversation, he realized the performance at the gala had only revealed part of the story. The real story involved everything Lily had done after losing the opportunities most young dancers depended upon. Meanwhile, Lily returned to her normal routine. She attended school, completed homework, and helped her mother whenever possible. The sudden attention from the gala felt strange. Friends and teachers congratulated her. Several videos of her performance circulated online. Yet she remained focused on the same responsibilities she had always prioritized. She never imagined that one of the most powerful men in the country was spending days investigating her life. Then, late one afternoon, Megan received an unexpected phone call. The caller introduced himself as a representative from Charles Whitmore's office. Megan initially assumed there had been a mistake. The representative politely explained that Mr. Whitmore wished to invite both her and Lily to a private event scheduled for the following week. No additional details were provided. After the call ended, Megan and Lily exchanged confused looks. Neither understood why a billionaire would want to meet them again. But as curiosity mixed with uncertainty, either realized that Charles was preparing to reveal everything he had learned, and what would happen at that upcoming event would change the course of their lives forever. 1 week later, Megan and Lily Brooks arrived at the headquarters of the Whitmore Foundation with far more questions than answers. The invitation had provided very little information beyond a date, time, and location. As they entered the modern glass building overlooking the Manhattan skyline, both felt nervous. Neither had ever been inside one of Charles Whitmore's corporate offices before. Employees greeted them warmly and escorted them through a series of hallways toward a large conference room. Everything about the experience felt surreal. Lily still struggled to understand why any of this was happening. To her, the gala performance already felt like something from another lifetime. Yet the attention had continued growing. Videos of her performance had spread online. Messages of support arrived from strangers across the country. Still, she remained focused on school and helping her mother. She never expected anything more. When the conference room doors opened, they were surprised to find dozens of people already waiting inside. Business executives, educators, arts program directors, journalists, and community leaders occupied seats around the room. Large screens displayed photographs from the gala. At the center stood Charles Whitmore. He smiled as they entered and personally welcomed them. The gesture alone shocked several people in attendance. Charles was known for being selective with his time, yet his attention remained entirely focused on Lily and Megan. After everyone settled into their seats, the room became quiet. Charles stepped forward and began speaking. He described the gala performance, but only briefly. Then he shifted to something far more important. He spoke about perseverance. He spoke about potential. Most importantly, he spoke about opportunities that never arrive simply because talent exists. He explained that over the previous week he had spent considerable time learning about Lily's story. As photographs appeared on the screens behind him, he shared details that many people in the room had never heard before. He spoke about the years of practice, the sacrifices, the loss of formal training, the commitment to continue improving without resources available to most performers. Then he spoke about Megan. He described the long hours she worked to support her daughter. He described the choices she made so Lily could continue pursuing an education despite financial challenges. As the story unfolded, many people in the room became visibly emotional. Megan lowered her head, overwhelmed by hearing her private struggles discussed publicly with such respect. Lily sat silently beside her, struggling to process everything. Then Charles revealed why he had gathered everyone together. He explained that the challenge from the gala had never truly been about money. It had been a spontaneous joke. But what followed had revealed something far more valuable than any amount of money could measure. He paused and looked directly at Lily. "Talent deserves opportunity," he said. "Character deserves recognition. And determination deserves support." The room became completely silent. Charles then announced the creation of the Lily Brooks Performing Arts Initiative, a new program funded through the Whitmore Foundation to support talented young artists facing financial barriers. The audience immediately applauded. Yet Charles was not finished. He explained that Lily would become the first recipient of the initiative. Her future dance education would be fully funded. Professional training, mentorship opportunities, academic support, travel expenses related to approved programs, and future artistic development would all be covered. Lily stared at him in disbelief. Tears filled her eyes almost instantly. Megan looked equally stunned. The room erupted into applause once again. Then Charles delivered one final surprise. He announced a financial assistance package designed to help Megan achieve long-term stability and reduce the burdens that had limited opportunities for her family. The audience rose to its feet. Several people openly wiped away tears. For a long moment, neither Lily nor Megan could speak. Everything they had worried about for years suddenly seemed different. Yet, as extraordinary as the moment felt, the greatest impact would not be measured by the opportunities being offered that day. The true impact would only become visible years later, when the world would finally see what Lily Brooks could accomplish when talent, determination, and opportunity were finally allowed to meet. 10 years later, the Lincoln Center Grand Theater in New York City was filled to capacity. Every seat was occupied. Journalists, educators, artists, philanthropists, and thousands of spectators had gathered for one of the most anticipated performances of the year. Massive screens illuminated the elegant venue while cameras prepared to broadcast the event across the country. Yet despite the scale of the occasion, one person sitting quietly in the audience found himself thinking about a very different night. Charles Whitmore sat near the front row, older now, but still carrying the same sharp presence that had made him one of the most influential businessmen in America. As he looked toward the stage, memories returned to him with surprising clarity. He remembered a crowded ballroom. He remembered a challenge announced as a joke. Most of all, he remembered a 13-year-old girl walking toward a stage while an entire room doubted her. Around him, the audience buzzed with anticipation. The performer they had come to see was now recognized internationally for her artistry, discipline, and inspiring story. Her name appeared in magazines, documentaries, and educational programs. Young performers across the country viewed her as proof that talent and perseverance could overcome obstacles. Yet despite her success, those closest to her often said the most remarkable thing about her was that she had never changed. Backstage, Lily Brooks took a deep breath and adjusted her costume. Years of professional training, countless performances, and international recognition had taught her how to manage pressure. Yet tonight felt different. This was not simply another performance. It represented the completion of a journey that began long before audiences knew her name. Nearby stood Megan, smiling proudly. Time had brought stability and opportunity into their lives, but their relationship remained exactly as strong as it had always been. The sacrifices that once defined their daily existence had become part of a larger story, one neither of them would ever forget. When the house lights dimmed, the audience immediately fell silent. Moments later, Lily stepped onto the stage. Thunderous applause filled the theater. Charles rose to his feet along with everyone else. He noticed something almost amusing. A decade earlier, people had stood because they were shocked. Tonight they stood because they genuinely admired what Lily had become. The performance that followed was extraordinary. Years of dedication were visible in every movement. Yet what moved the audience most was not technical perfection. It was emotion. Every moment communicated gratitude, resilience, and hope. By the time the final note faded, many people in the audience were wiping away tears. The standing ovation lasted several minutes. Eventually, Lily returned to center stage holding a microphone. The applause slowly softened. She looked across the crowd and immediately spotted two familiar faces. Charles and Megan sat only a short distance apart. Seeing them there brought an unexpected smile to her face. "People often ask me what changed my life," she began. The theater became completely silent. "Some think it was a scholarship. Others think it was professional training or opportunities one never expected to receive. Those things mattered. They changed my future. But they were not the beginning. She paused for a moment. The beginning was someone choosing to see potential where others saw limitations. Charles lowered his head slightly. Lily continued, "The most powerful gift you can give another person is not money. It is belief. Because when someone truly believes in you, they help you believe in yourself." The audience erupted into applause once again. Tears filled Megan's eyes. Charles remained silent, deeply moved by her words. In that moment, he realized something important. The greatest investment he had ever made was not in technology, real estate, or business. It was in a young girl who refused to surrender her dream. As the audience rose for one final standing ovation, Lily looked across the theater and smiled. The journey that began with doubt had ended with purpose. The challenge that started as a joke had become a legacy. And the girl who once stood unnoticed near a service entrance had become living proof that extraordinary potential can exist in the places people least expect, waiting only for someone willing to recognize it.